Thank you. Thanks for having me. Tony Lindwall, who is our Acting Manager of Community and Cultural Life, was supposed to come today too, but there's too much going on at work. So she apologises, and that means you have to listen to me for 20 minutes, so for that I apologise. So today we're going to speak on museums are more than just four walls. I think a lot of the time museums get stuck in the idea that their museums are their building and the objects within them, and they just sort of work within those confines, but actually museums are a lot more than that. So Tongara Museum, which is Shellharbour City Council's museum, is a local history museum which explores the history of Shellharbour City, and we aim to preserve and present the community's experience to ensure an understanding of cultural heritage in our area. So the museum has one permanent part-time staff member for 28 hours, that's me, and we have 6 amazing volunteers, 2 of them who have volunteered for over 20 years, and we just couldn't do without them. They're awesome. And the museum wasn't always under the management of council. The museum started in 1988 as a bicentenary museum, and it was run by a dedicated team of volunteers. So they took that museum and they managed it for about 15 years, I think, before council took over the operations. So in that 15 years when the volunteers were managing the museum, they really built the foundations of working well with council and the community. Like, they really did all the hard yards. And they worked so well with the council that the council in the end said, it's a no-brainer, let's just help you out and take over the management. So that's what happened. And I've worked at council for about 14 years, I think now. So your councils need you, and in more ways than you might think. So a lot of you don't realise how valuable your museums are as a resource to your local councils. And I expect many of you are from regional areas in New South Wales. And regional councils tend to do things with community really well. So you are just a little gold mine of information for councils. And you need to let them know that. You need to tell them how fabulous you are, because you really are. So some departments that I work with regularly, and I know you might say that it's easier for you because you are a council employee, you do work with council, but it wasn't always the way. And our volunteers, before I came on board, before the museum was under council's management, always worked this way with council, and they always worked with these departments. So usually you might think that if you're a museum or a cultural arts centre, you would work with cultural arts in councils, maybe the libraries, the local studies staff. They're the sort of natural fits. But you can also work with loads of other council departments. So town planning we work with regularly. We work with media and communications regularly. Events, the environment department, GIS and mapping are constantly on the phone to us. Building and DA, and tourism as well. So they're some of the areas that you wouldn't think normally that you would have anything to offer those departments, but you can offer them so much, especially in terms of building and DA and town planning. Our museum volunteers edited when council was drafting the LEP for heritage listed properties. They gave the draft to our volunteers. The volunteers went through it all, said, no, that's not right, no, that's not right. The museum volunteers are the keepers of the knowledge of the local history of the area. They really know their stuff, and you've really got to use your potential in that way. So they just provide such a good service, our volunteers, to our council, that our council couldn't be without them. Another way we work often with a council department is in the building and DA section. A lot of times Shellharbour City is one of the largest growing regions in New South Wales, and we're getting a lot of DA applications in. So some of those DA applications come in for extensions or new buildings. They might be for houses that were built in the 1920s or the 1930s, for which there's no building approval. So council comes to our museum volunteers and says, help us find the approval. And 9 times out of 10 they do. So it's just thinking about working with the resources, what you have in your museum, and just thinking about doing things in different ways. So bigger doesn't always mean better. You don't have to have a big building and a big budget and lots of staff to deliver big results, produce quality exhibitions, develop valuable partnerships and engage meaningfully with your community. All you have to do is be clever, innovative, and most importantly, make friends with people that have more money than you do. So Tongara Museum our museum is currently only 100 square metres, that includes storage. We are a tiny space. So out of necessity, we've had to take our museum out to the people. We rarely use the building. The building's open, but we rarely use it for events and we rarely use it to promote ourselves. So we take our museum out to the people. And in doing so, that's been a real benefit because we've been able to reach audiences who otherwise wouldn't engage with the museum. And actually, we're sort of doing the opposite of what you're doing, Ray, at Lithgow, in that you're using your fantastic space to engage all these different groups. We don't have a fantastic space. So we're taking ourselves out there and engaging with those different groups. And councils are a really good way of getting your message out there because councils put on loads of events during the year and they're always looking for good community events and community engagement. And so we often do museum pop-up shops at council events that really have nothing to do with the museum. So Australia Day, Breakfast by the Lake is a massive event, things like that. So we'll have a museum pop-up shop there so that people can engage with, find out what we're doing about the museum, learn about us. So this project was a project that we worked on with Shellharbour, and they actually approached us. They wanted some historic community art, something that related to the local history of the area. So they were able to, we assisted them with this project, and there's 2 artworks there. The top one is a heritage interpretation wall that goes down one of the main corridors in Stockland, and the one below hangs above a huge escalator, and they're actually museum objects and plants relating to the locally Aboriginal significance, things they used to eat and medicines and stuff like that. So there's actually a key on the escalator, so people can look at it and find out what those objects are and find out about their significance. And it's massive promotion for our museum. I don't know how many tens of thousands of people go to Shellharbour every year, but there's no way that we alone could promote ourselves to that many people and promote the history of Shellharbour to that many people without developing these partnerships. So that cost us my time, nothing else. They paid for it. So some of the other council partnerships we do are with our Community Connections Department, that's our cultural services. So we've worked with them on the Shellharbour Women in Sport project, the Lake Illawarra Art Trail, where local artists are installing art pieces along the lake foreshore, and with that we use our museum app to plot the tour. We work with our property department on historic properties and memorials in the city that need restoration or new signage. We work with tourism and assets a lot of the time. If they're doing upgrades to historic properties, they need to know what that property used to look like, what it was made of, all of that sort of stuff. We work with our GIS and planning department often on new estates, naming streets for new subdivisions, making sure that they're historically significant or have some significance to the area. We work with the planning services, so as I was saying before, town centre planning, LEPs, all of that sort of stuff. Building approvals, tourism obviously, we work with them all the time. They're always asking us, what's the history of this building? What's the history of that building? Because they promote it through their social media networks. So they're always at us for information, which we provide, because then they just plug us on their social media, and it doesn't cost us anything. And media and communications at council we work with as well a lot. If they're promoting anything the council's doing, if they're restoring a boat ramp, or if they're, I don't know, planting a new tree, whatever, they're at us. Is there something, what can we say about what's the history of this site and what happened here? So we work really well with all departments. So some of the projects we've worked with our council on this year, this is in the last 12 months, we did our digital exhibition. A lot of the exhibitions we do are digital because we are confined by our space. So one of the projects was Shellharbour Anzacs, which was a digital exhibition which the council, all they had to do was create another page on their website. Their web people did it all for us. We did the content, massive amounts of work, gave it all to them, and they put it up and handled all the tech side of it. I mean, I don't know how to do that. I haven't got a clue. So hand it over, and they're happy to have it on the council page because it's celebrating a major event. It's recognising a major event, and it falls in line with their Anzac Day ceremonies, their Remembrance Day ceremonies. It's great promotion of the local soldiers in the area, so they were more than happy. So these tabs click and open into flip books that talk about the local soldiers and all the history of war in Shellharbour. Another project was the Mabo exhibition. So our Aboriginal liaison officer was flat out during Mabo week, and she was really disappointed because she really wanted an exhibition on the historic Mabo decision. So sorry, it was part of Reconciliation Week, and she didn't have time to do it. She had planned to feature it, but she didn't have time, and we said, don't worry about it, we'll do something for you. So we whipped up some content, gave it to our graphic designer who printed out the panels, and this was on exhibition at the Shellharbour Village Exhibition Space as part of our Reconciliation Week events. So it's also promoting the museum, and it's just working well with other people in council. This was a joint project with Wollongong City Council to promote Illawarra 200, which is the 200th anniversary of the first land grants issued in the region. So we developed a travelling exhibition to feature that declaration, and that's travelled around to all the events that Shellharbour City Council put on in that 12 months. So Australia Day, Anzac Day, Reconciliation Day, all of the events that council usually did, we just travelled this exhibition to all of them. So it gets the word out to thousands of people who usually wouldn't engage with your museum. Another big part of the work we do is the Shellharbour Images project. So that's the library's local studies photo collection. Library staff don't have time to catalogue and research the photos. It's not just cataloguing them, it's researching them. So they've handed the photos over to the museum, and there's 4,000 online already, but they've catalogued and researched another 4,000, and we're about to upload those and put those online as well. So the library staff couldn't be without the museum volunteers either, because they support them in massive ways. And another thing our museums are working on is the digitisation of the entire collection. So that will be available online eventually, which will get the word out even further to a wider audience. So the other really important thing you have to do as a museum is make community partnerships. So some of the partnerships that we've made in the last 12 months are with Grealy State Park. We work really well with Grealy State Park. They are fantastic support to us. They have way more money than we do, and they're really supportive. There's lots of historic elements to the park. There's stone walls, there's old farm buildings, so we really work well together. And they actually paid for a touring app that we developed. I signed up for the app. We started tours of some of our major regional areas. So Albion Park, Shellharbour Village, the Lake Illawarra Art Trail we put on the tour, and then I thought, how am I going to pay for this? And so I thought, well, maybe if I ask Grealy State Park if they want to be part of the app, they can contribute to a portion of the cost. Anyway, they ended up paying for the whole thing. So that was really great for us. And our app is called Shellharbour. We've only got 5 tours on there at the moment. We can put up to 35 tours on there. So we're working all the time. We're working with our environment department to do another tour of Windang Island and the bird and wildlife around the island. So another partnership is with Biosis in Wollongong, who are archaeologists. So we have a lot of Aboriginal artefacts in our collection, and they really need to be specially catalogued. So Biosis, who we've helped many times in the past with research when they're doing historic research on sites that they're excavating, we've provided them with a lot of information in the past. So Alex from Biosis said, well, I was showing him the collection one day and he said, well, why don't we do that for you? And I'll use it as a training exercise for my junior archaeologists. So they're cataloguing our entire collection, which is some 20,000 items, which I just used to look at and go, just used to freak me out. They are handling the whole thing for us. So it's unbelievable support, which wouldn't have happened if we didn't help them out with research and information. So Stockland Shellharbour, I've talked about before, the RSLs we work with all the time, fantastic bunch of guys and gals, full of knowledge of the local area, so they helped us greatly on our Shellharbour Anzacs exhibition. And we were talking about social media before. Another partnership we do really well is with Lost Wollongong and Shellharbour History and Photos Facebook pages. So the administrators of those pages are constantly tagging me. They do my head in some nights, but it's really worth it because if they, someone posts a photo, an old historic photo of somewhere in Shellharbour or somewhere in Wollongong, they tag me in it and they say, oh, Tamara, do you know anything about this? So if I can answer it there and then, I'll answer it there and then. Otherwise, I say I have to get back to the volunteers, the keepers of the knowledge, and I'll let them know what the answer is. So in turn, they plug our museum every week on those pages, constantly, daily sometimes. And Lost Wollongong, I think, has about 15,000 members, and Shellharbour's got about 8,000. So that's masses of people are finding out about our museum and the service we can provide. And we get a lot of information requests come through those Facebook pages too, from people wanting to do their family history or wanting to know about a particular building or a particular place in Shellharbour. What's the history of that? Or so, sorry. Okay. So I'm nearly done. So they're really, really worthwhile partnerships that don't cost you anything. All they cost you is the time to do the research. But most of your museum volunteers know it already. It's all in their heads. It's not hard for them. And this was the app I was talking to you about before, which is what Grealy State Park paid for. So we did an exhibition on Grealy State Park as a bit of a, you pat our back, we'll pat yours. We decided to do an exhibition to promote the app as well. We did an exhibition at the same time that promoted the history of Grealy State Park and the farm. And then after that exhibition was finished, we donated the exhibition panels to the state park. So the panels are on their cafe wall out the front, and Grealy State Park paid to get them put in glass and installed. So they were happy to take them. And there's thousands of people that look at those every year. So our museum is promoted again and seen by thousands of people who otherwise wouldn't see us. So the future for us is that our council is building a civic centre, which includes a new city museum. So we will be working in the same way when we move to the City Museum. When we move to the City Museum, we'll have a great new space. So we'll feel like Ray. We'll go, yay, we've got a fantastic space. So we'll be working more like Ray and Lithgow as well, encouraging people to come in and use the space. But we're certainly not going to stop working the way we are, because it really works. It really gets the word out there. So you've always got to be engaging with your community, taking it out to places you wouldn't necessarily think of, and really plugging yourselves, and so let people know the value of your museums and let them use you. That's it, really.
There were some really great ideas there. So, any questions? Now or never? Up the back.
Ray's got a question.
I do. Tamara, the app, is there a specific software that you've used to base the app on?
We used, actually, I think the museum here uses it too. We use My Tours. They're a New Zealand company.
Okay.
They were awesome and cheap, really, for what you get. So I think it was about, like, there's different stages. Like if you have, 200 to 500 downloads, they charge you this, then it goes up depending on what you use. But we're on the minimum one at the moment. But I think it wasn't like $1,000 something, and then you pay the Apple Store and the Google Play Store like $100 a year or something to have it on the stores so people can download them. Like, it's nothing really. It's like $1,000 to us is like, but it's pocket change really for the promotion that it has.
And find a sponsor, I guess.
Yeah, and we don't have to do anything. All you have to do, it's so simple. It's all web-based, so all you have to do is type in your content, add your photos, and they handle it all. Yeah. That's done.
Thanks very much for a very informative talk. But we at Thredbo Historical Society are faced with a bit of a problem. We would love to replicate what you're doing, but we are in a recalcitrant council, Snowy Shire, and it seems that because Thredbo people are not ratepayers in the Snowy Shire, our president hasn't got far. But I'd like to add that we only have 50 square metres of space, and so we would love to do more outreach stuff in the community. Only volunteer based, and seeing Thredbo is such a multicultural type of town, and the Shire is, we are in the process of launching a book next year based on Thredbo 60 years of Thredbo and Pioneers and Legends. So we would have thought that this was quite an important topic, a multicultural topic for the Snowy Shire. But so far we haven't got far, so I just thought you'd like to maybe give us some ideas.
Well, sometimes it depends who you approach in council too. Not all council staff are as fabulous as me. It really does depend who you approach though, and what their interests are and what their passions are. So I'd suggest if you're hitting your head against a wall with one person, forget it. Don't go to them. Go to someone else. Go to someone in a totally different section, and I'm giving you 100 sections of people you can approach. And you're not going to hit your head on a wall with every single department. There's going to be people in those councils that have the same passion for history and the same passion for community as you guys do. So if you hit a wall, don't be discouraged. Just brush it off and move on. Move on to the next one until you find a really great staff member you can work with. Yeah.
What are your online audiences like? Visitor numbers to the
gosh.
ANZAC digital exhibition?
Wow, I don't have those stats off the top of my head.
But are you
We are,
monitoring
and we report on them quarterly. So the stats go through the council's website, so the council media department actually get those stats. And off the top of my head, I really couldn't say, I'm sorry. I know that our web page on council gets probably, what did it get? It probably gets 3,000, 4,000 hits a quarter on the council's page. That's currently. So when we move to the City Museum, all that will change as well, and that will be promoted a lot more than it currently is through social media as well. Any others? Doreen. Hello, Doreen.
How many villages are there in your council that you're representing, and are there more museums there as well that you're working with?
There's the Illawarra Light Rail Museum, which are in Albion Park, and there's Haas Museum, which is the Historic Aircraft Restoration Society. So those two museums, because they have a common bond, if you like, they work really well together. And Haas is doing great things all the time. So we don't really work with them that much, in such that sort of the work we do is very different. Because we're small, a lot of the work that our museum does is research-based rather than object-based. So that may change when we move to the new building, because we will have a lot more space, but just because of the nature of the building we have, that's sort of dictated the work that we do. But
So-
that has worked well
So
for us.
you've got volunteers from different villages in the area that know their history.
Yes. Yeah, so our museum currently is based in Albion Park. So there was always two main centres, Shellharbour Village, which was on the coast, and Albion Park, which was in the west, and Oak Flats in the middle, and a few scattered towns. Now that population is joining with new suburbs, Shell Cove and Flinders and all the others. Yeah, so it's, but we have volunteers from all over.
Okay.
Yeah, and we have new volunteers too. There's a lot of new residents in Shellharbour City. A lot of people move from Sydney down to retire, and so our volunteers aren't just old stalwarts, and not even all local people. Some of them have only lived in Shellharbour for 5 years or so, which is great because they're learning about the history of the place.
Yeah.
That was really fantastic, Tamara. Some great ideas there. The next person I'd like to introduce is Luke Grealy, Museum Manager, Museum of the Riverina, and he has some great culled programs to talk about. So, how do you do it? Okay.
Let's see this mouse. Oh, that's not on the right. Yes. Hello, testing. It's cold outside. It's funny saying that when I started doing research on cold communities and non-English speaking background communities in regional New South Wales, there aren't a lot, as we probably all know, 2-4% most towns that I looked at. And so one of my points I wanted to make is, if you do decide to engage with your cold community, beware of cold exhaustion. Don't just pick on the one poor Indian restaurateur or the Pakistani doctor and his family and flog them to death. Like, you need to work with them and what they're willing and able to do. So this morning I'm just going to give 4 quick examples. At the Museum of the Riverina there are dozens of examples where we've worked with the cold community. The bulk of these just took time, not money. Some of them did cost, and I'll be very specific because the usual disclaimer, I know I'm working at a well-resourced museum relatively at Wagga, funded by the council with contributions from Arts New South Wales, and I'm talking to a room full of largely volunteer people that work with volunteer museums. And although Museum of the Riverina does run an outreach program to about 30 volunteer museums around the Riverina, and matter of fact, the lady who did that until recently, I saw Rachel Vincent, who's, Rachel's moved on, I can tell all sorts of lies about her. No, she's moved out to Broken Hill to an amazing job out there, and we're hoping soon to advertise for her replacement. But Rachel worked very closely with a lot of volunteer museums around the Riverina, and so we were pretty aware of the challenges, particularly money and resourcing. That's a Fusion Festival is a major multicultural event that another section of council runs, but we always make sure we participate. A lot of it happens around our precinct in the middle of the city. We have 2 sites, one up at the Botanic Gardens, one in town. So the one in town is in the thick of this, so we make sure we've got all sorts of activities. The doors are open. We're advertising public toilets even just to get people to come in the door. But that's just a scene from that event. And it's one of those activities in our community that we latch onto. There are others like Little Big Day Out and Run for Kids, you know, where, so if somebody else is running an event, our museum tries to jump on the back of that and leverage off profile and visitors. Firstly, having a look around your local community, it's depending on the size of your community, it might be obvious if there are called people there or not. Don't be put off by Anglo-sounding surnames. If you dig a little bit, you might be surprised where people have actually come from. The people that can help you at your local council, social planning staff, library staff, as Tamara was talking about, the local library information studies people. You might have a branch of the Multicultural Council or Family History Society. There are sources you can go to dig up information on who in your community is from a CALD background. And other things I used was the Primary Health Network Community ID website. You just Google it, comes up, and you can search your town and it gives you some stats. And I found the staff at the Australian Bureau of Statistics really friendly and helpful and surprisingly easy to get through to and deal with. Although the first time I tried to ring them was when the census crash happened, so they said ring back in a fortnight, which I did. Anyway, the other thing is if all that fails, walk around your local cemetery. Now, I've cheated a bit here. This photo is actually from Broome Cemetery. I was on a holiday there not long ago, and Broome is well known for its multicultural mix. But I was so taken with the surnames on that headstone, the Peripanani, Howard, Yin, Fong, Morrissey. Like, that's a great, interesting research project right there. And through Trove and Ancestry.com, you know, you can start feeding those surnames in and doing your own little bit of investigation. And of course, always go to your colleagues and friends who for advice that make your path a little bit quicker. Now, engaging with the CALD community is, firstly, to me, it's about building trust and friendships, and often that's easier in smaller regional communities. Be a good neighbour. When you know there are people in town, invite them to your place for a cup of tea, invite them to your place for lunch, go to their home, make a social, personal connection. And once you start to build those friendships and trust, then you can start to explore other things about what they might be interested in doing and what you might be able to help them do. They might be interested in art or performing art or growing or preparing food, performing music. There might be some way that you can engage with those people in your museum and give them a venue and a platform for that. By the way, this was just a simple little thing we did on during one of the Fusion festivals. Put a world map on the museum and got people to come up and mark a line of indicating their journey from where they came from to Wagga. I actually had the photo of the finished product, but it was just a massive black lines, you know, which showed, was fascinating, the many and diverse paths that people took to arrive in Wagga. So just stick a world map on the wall, you know, and say to people, come and mark out where you're from. I mean, we even had people who were like 3rd generation, 4th generation Aussies marking their trips from their ancestors' trip from Ireland. That was good, all legitimate. Another big CALD event when I first started at the museum, I feel a bit of a fraud. I've only been in the museum going for 2 years, although I've had lifelong passion for history and I've been a member of numerous historical societies, been a volunteer myself. But working in museums, we were lucky enough to host from MASS, or the Powerhouse Museum it was then, Faith Fashion Fusion, an exhibition about successful Australian women Muslim fashion designers and others. As a part of that, we got together with the local Muslim community. We were lucky we had a local Muslim association, and we started to plan some public programs. So we got this exhibition on what are we going to do during it to attract people in the door. One of the interesting things was, at the time of this planning, the federal terror raids, I don't know if you remember, late 2014, Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, coordinated raids by federal police. There was a lot of pressure on conspicuous Muslims. The whole Ride With Me campaign was starting. where non-Muslims were offering to accompany Muslims on public transport so they didn't get harassed. So there was a bit of pressure, you know, and a bit of talk and a bit of, you know, and the Alan Jones and the Ray Hadleys of the world inflaming things where they could. But that was sort of the shadow in which we were organising this. And our group just wanted to, their outcome of the first few meetings was that they wanted to challenge this ignorance and fear with education and entertainment. There were two things they came up with. So the first one was Islamic Conversations, a public talk. We got a couple of guest speakers that came down. Dr. Zach Matthews from Newcastle Uni on the left came free as part of his academic duties. Susan Carlin, well known, she's a white Anglo-Aussie girl that converted to Islam well before she met her husband Walid Ali. But we paid her a fee because she's a bit of a celeb, but it was a crowd puller. But I'm sure she's such a lovely lady, if you put the bite on her and cried poor and talked about the important work you're doing, you'd probably get her for, you know, not much. But anyway, so we had this, Zach talking about the Quran and Islam from a scholarly point of view, Susan talking about, you know, her life as a white Anglo-Aussie girl who converted to Islam of her own, you know, course of life. We actually thought, as this event drew closer, we started to develop a strategy for dealing with the bigotry and the horror that we thought would come, but as a matter of fact, we really had no need for worry. As the event drew nearer, our museum can take 90 people. It ended up, we had to move next door to the main council chambers. We ended up with over 220 people, standing room only, and the Q&A was so successful, and people were so interested in engaging and asking questions, and even those, you know, you might feel a bit embarrassed about asking the silly elephant in the room question, but the way Zach and Susan and the community handled it, the people did actually get up and ask those elephant in the room questions and were able to get you know, considered thoughtful responses. So it was a great way of exchanging information about the Quran and Islam, and let's not be afraid. The other thing that happened was, you see the guys in the background, they came down from Lakemba Mosque. Dr. Atta Reman, who's our president of MAWA in Wagga, the Muslim Association, contacted them, and you can see some of the panels over the side there and at the back. But they bought a lot of panels at no cost to the museum, trucked them down from Lakemba, set them all up, had brochures and information. It just added a bit of gravitas to the event that we were able to provide all that information about Islam. I wish I had the later photo. It was, like I said, it was standing room only, people all along the walls, and we were particularly delighted that day that 7 Pakistani women came who were dressed in full burqas, and we were told that they very rarely venture outside their homes. So we felt that was a positive sign that we were working the right way to build those friendships and relationships and trust. Yes, cool. That was a great event, and then we had to shut it down to move next door to our afternoon of cultural activities. That's in the historic council chambers next door. Again, it was packed out. People were so positive and warm that day. One of the things we had was a demonstration of hijab tying, and rather than hesitation, we were delighted to see a queue of women and girls line up to enjoy the experience. So it was a very positive day, and worked out really quite well for the museum. Sorry, I'm galloping through this. One of the other things is a local woman, Hynd used the opportunity of our event to launch her online business, LaylaHijabs.com. I'm not normally one for shameless plugs, but if you need a beautiful scarves, it's Moira, my wife, not wearing one today, or hijabs, shopping with Hynd is not just a commercial and transaction, it's an investment in a happy multicultural community in Wagga. The other outcome was reps from the Catholic diocese who were at that day approached the museum to see if we could help host an ongoing interfaith dialogue between all faiths of Wagga. They were sort of moved by the event. I'm not a religious person at all, but God seemed to be moving in mysterious ways. And an unexpected benefit was that the local Muslim community, because we'd sort of become friendly with them, they started using council, the museum, as their gateway into council. So whether they wanted to put in a DA, they had a problem with barking dogs, they would come to us and say, who do we talk to, you know? So that was a good thing. Another example of working with the called community, this one took 10 years. So in 2006, a chance meeting between the museum staff at an event in Tamara. They met with Dr. Barry McGowan, who was then of ANU. Barry's a well-known historian who has done a lot of work and published a lot of books on archaeology and history of the Chinese. This was one of the treasures that came out of the work with Barry, and it was these are the children of Dang Charles Doon. He worked in Tumut, started off as a cook and a market gardener, and ended up running Doon's major transport company. And his kids were very competent horse riders and won many prizes at local shows for best and quietest pony with that particular horse. So, but the whole tracking the dragon thing, so Barry worked for years. We got some funding to help pay for his work, but he put in heaps of free time. And that led to the exhibition Tracking the Dragon, History of Chinese in the Riverina. It toured to Albury Library Museum as well after we finished with it. There was a 60-page booklet. We got some funding from Powerhouse or MASS and Arts New South Wales and the Migration Heritage Centre to fund that booklet. And then during the process, Barry brought his archaeology students over from ANU, again at no cost to the museum. They reviewed a lot of sites and came up with really important information and objects for the exhibition. Then after that, and we've only just, Barry spent another several years writing 5 essays on 5 towns in the Riverina, Chinese histories, Tumut, Cootamundra, Narrandera and Wagga, and they're now on our website as a primary research document for anyone in future that needs to research the history of the Chinese in southern New South Wales and the Riverina. So there were elements of Barry that cost and elements that we got grants for, but there was lots of free stuff that came. And that was one of the points I wanted to make about looking for resources, going to your nearest regional university, maybe even high schools, but finding an academic or a PhD student who might be able to do some research and work on your behalf that correlates with something that your museum's interested in. For example, you know, researching your called community. The other one that I wanted to share quickly was We Are Here, the LGBTIQ community histories of Wagga. That's Miss Wagga on the left with Sam Leah, who did the research for the exhibition. Miss Wagga marched in Mardi Gras for many, many years, and in 2013 won Best Dressed, which is no small feat. And we have the dress and the trophy in this exhibition. But as an example of the power of museums, social change, which is an area I'm particularly interested in, it all started, there was a horrible article in the local paper by a monthly columnist when the gay marriage thing was, equal marriage thing was coming up, bagging gay people and talking about AIDS and gay people shouldn't be allowed near children. And there was a big firestorm of media publicity. But out of that, working firstly with the local ABC, and then the ABC person left town, so we took over. And it was just going to be a little thing in our foyer, and but as we dug deeper and deeper, all these people came out of the woodwork with stories and objects, and it blew out to a room about a third of the size of this room. But we now have an established rainbow collection, and again, using academics at regional unis, Dr. Jessie Lim, who's a same-sex parent, contributed to the exhibition with research. Then she went off and off her own bat and got some funding to develop protocols and guidelines for collecting and interpreting LGBTIQ material. So once they're produced, we can share them with museums all around regional Australia, and that was at no cost and no effort on the museum's behalf. The main thing with that one was Sam, we paid her, we worked it out, it was about 16 days of labour to interview and research stories, so then we get the panels done. We did those quite cheaply. Anyway, that's about it. Well, one thing I did want to mention quickly, it was funny, I just bumped into Jackie Newling at the break, I didn't realise she was here. The Flourish Heritage Garden. I went to a thing at Orange a couple of years ago that Jackie ran about telling stories of history through using food, and we got a bit inspired at the Museum of the Riverina. We've started a little garden, the Flourish Heritage Garden. It's about 10, 12 metres square, donated plants, you know, free labour, and we've had called community, aged care facilities, disability providers coming in and working in that garden. Our next step is to, you know, get a barbecue and a sink on the back veranda and try and have food demonstration areas. That was just another thing that we did. So I guess, yeah, keep it simple. It might be just finding someone in your community that can give a talk with a slideshow and some photos. That goodwill can evolve and develop into other things. This was local members of the indie community doing a Bollywood dance workshop. As you can see, the white guy's clearly got no rhythm, but he's having fun. He's having fun and he's learning. So that was another cheap and useful thing that we did. And Ray was talking about FPOS before. One of the things we found at our museum, it was always cash, which was a nuisance. We looked into FPOS. It was really dear, lots of reconciliation and paperwork. So we just put in a PayPal account, cost $130, links through our phone to an account, and we can take credit cards. And that's made a big difference in terms of selling product through the museum. So really, that's really all I want to say. And you know, it's great to engage a cold community. The energy and ideas they bring, they make you more interesting, your museum, to a greater range of people, and more interesting often to funding bodies as well. Sorry, I did gallop through that a bit, but I hope that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. That was really terrific. Any questions from the audience?
Any lies?
This is a stupid question from a stupid person. What's cold? What is cold?
Oh, sorry. I actually had that in my notes to spell it out, but I didn't. Culturally and linguistically diverse. So culturally diverse and linguistically. So it's your non-English speaking background, your migrant communities. But the reason I went with the We Are Here queer exhibition is because they are a part of our culturally diverse community as distinct from linguistically. And we were doing that exhibition as I was preparing this, and I thought, I checked with Deborah and a few other people, and I said, is that legitimate? And they said, yes, it is, so that's why. But called, sorry, that's really a bit of an oversight. I beg your pardon.
Any other questions? Okay, thanks very much.